Here we've got Liza with a great okay, we have mission mindset, the moments that decide loyalty. Can't wait for this one. There you are. Hello, Liza. Good to see you.
Hi Nate. How you doing?
Great. It's been an awesome day so far.
Yes, it has. And I think the next segue from Natalie's to what we're going to talk about, calmness, helping out the experience. We're going to talk about calmness under pressure in a completely different way with our special guest Phil Gant.
Love it. All right. See you soon.
Thanks. All right, Phil, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Liza? Thanks for the invite.
I'm doing great. I'm very excited to bring this talk to everyone today. It comes directly into what we've been talking about all morning, but from a completely different perspective. So I would love everybody to help me welcome Phil Gant. Phil is the Senior Director of Programs for the Honors Foundation here at Fort Bragg and the Pinehurst campus, where he leads and coaches fellows as they move through their transition and into their program. A retired U.S. Army Green Beret, Phil served in the Special Forces community and most recently with the 3rd Special Forces Group here at Fort Bragg, deploying multiple times in support of combat operations before retiring after 20 years of service. He moved into the nonprofit space to reach back and support those preparing to separate, providing the guidance and resources he wishes he had during his own transition. In his current role, he helps special operations professionals translate elite leadership into a clear civilian path through career strategy, mentorship, and community connections. Welcome, Phil, to the CX Summit.
Thank you, Liza. Again, I appreciate the invite. It's a pleasure.
Yes, so Phil and I actually know each other. We've done a few things together. I've spoken at a few events for the Honor Foundation, and now he's giving it back to us here at Instant Team. So we're excited to kind of talk through that mission mindset. The moments that decide loyalty is our topic. And that's when experiences get real. So on the customer experience side, which what we've talked about, gaining your customers' loyalty, keeping calm in what can be sometimes very stressful situations. On the customer experience side can relate directly to some experience I'm sure that you've had, Phil, during your time of service. And definitely some of those missions are more life critical than some of the frontline operations we talk about on the customer experience side. But I think our audience can take away some really good key nuggets from you, from your experience, and how that relates to their own leadership here in the customer experience space.
Thank you.
So let's define the concept a little bit. When you think about a mission, what are the moments to you that decide whether the outcome holds together or starts to kind of fall apart?
Yeah, well, I think at least from a military perspective, I think it's pretty common across the board when you're preparing for a mission. It's incredibly important to do some deliberate planning, and that includes going through the steps of thinking about what might go wrong, and making proper preparations for that. So we call that contingency planning. If you know something, if you just think through the entire mission, what could go wrong and how am I going to respond to that? Now, just like any plan, it's always something's going to throw it off. It's never going to go perfect, especially in combat. But without the beginning of a plan, then there's nothing to flex from, and there's nothing to adjust back to. And so I think that's incredibly important. And so that goes along with, before going on that mission, you're rehearsing the actions for the mission, but you're also rehearsing those contingencies. If my vehicle hits an IED, how do I respond? If we lose a certain number of people, how do we respond? And just thinking through all those things, I think, increases your chances of success. And does that make sense?
It does. How many of those scenarios did you normally play out? I mean, I can imagine there's.
There we go. I think we're back.
Okay. Did I lose you for a second?
I lost. I at least lost video. I don't know if everyone else did, but what was your last part?
Okay. Well, we're back now. Well, strangely enough, what I was asking for is how many different scenarios do you plan with when you're going through that? I can imagine there's 1,000 different ways a mission could go. So what does that look like in size and scope?
Yeah, I would say it's the important stuff that you got to focus on. And so any mission, any operation that you're working on, there's 100 things that could go right or wrong there. And so there's too many variables. I think that's what you're alluding to, right?
Yeah.
So you're focusing on the big stuff. If you're juggling 3 balls or 5 balls or whatever, some of those might be rubber and some of them might be glass. You got to focus on the ones that are mission critical, that you need to make sure you have a good grip on it. But if something goes wrong, we need a plan for that. The little stuff, it might not go perfect, but you can work through that. And I think a big part of the preparation for that is identifying that stuff that's mission critical. That also includes, we're making assumptions when we're going into a mission. And those assumptions can either be confirmed or denied. And there might be a question that drives the rest of the mission. Is the enemy at that building? And you might need that trigger met before you continue operation. And if it doesn't, then you back away. I think those decision points are important for any planned mission that you plan to do, and then how you're going to respond at those respective decision points.
Yes, for sure. So before we get too tactical, let's take it back a little bit on a more personal level. I know I've heard you talk about this personally, but some of the hardest moments that you have was your transition actually out of the service and into what us as military people call the civilian world. How did that experience kind of help shape what you're doing now and your thought process of starting to give back in a different way?
I appreciate that. Yeah, I had a break in service in 2006. It was still when the war was going on, and so I didn't have much time coming home before I finished my last deployment and then went into the civilian world, like you said. Mm-hmm. I didn't prepare properly. I didn't do that deliberate planning. I just figured I could figure it out. And everybody always says, "Oh, jobs will present themselves when you get out. You got these skills that you can market and all these things." I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't feel prepared. I knew I had money to go to college, and I knew my wife got accepted into this college, and it just turned into, I couldn't support her going through and she couldn't support me going through. And so we were just in this rut, and I was really frustrated and angry. And that goes along with any military transition. You lose a loss of purpose and a loss of identity. And so I wasn't a very happy guy during 2006. And so the decision, we made the decision that I was going to go back in to the military. So it was a failed transition, for lack of a better word. And it was because I didn't plan properly.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So approaching my retirement in 2021, I knew I needed to prepare better. Although I didn't have a structure that kind of walked me through that process. I put a lot of time and effort into improving myself, getting a better understanding of who I was and what I wanted to do when I got out. Mm-hmm. I saw a gap with what the military did to prepare us, and how difficult that transition actually was. So I wanted to find a way to stand in that gap and help others through it. And the Honor Foundation was looking to stand up a campus here at Fort Bragg around the same time. So timing just worked out. but the mission fulfilled what I was looking for. And so I found I didn't even know nonprofits had full-time jobs, but I found a job with a nonprofit that really fulfilled what I was hoping to do, and which was continue to contribute to my community.
Yeah.
So
Do you think part of the struggle was earlier, right, you said you weren't prepared, or you didn't quite know what to expect, but do you think the time in service makes a difference when you see service members who are trying to transition maybe after 4 to 6 years of service versus, retiring at the 20+ year mark?
Yeah. So from my experience, I mean, I got out when I only had 6, and then I got out again when I had 20. So from my experience, there's still very much a loss of identity and a loss of purpose, loss of camaraderie, things like that. The being in the military, you're spoiled with a really high sense of purpose, and it's a challenge to find something in the private sector that fulfills that, which is why I was drawn to nonprofit. I'm still very service focused. But I lost my train of thought. Please, can you ask the question again? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I find your story very interesting because it has a lot of unique parallels in my own story. So my husband also got out early after a few deployments to Iraq, went to school, and then we got married. And then he went back into the military. So we had that same kind of he did a small transition, and then he went back in, and now he's going to retire from his service. And from what I've seen with other veterans and in transition, that sense of purpose and belonging, he really missed that after he got out the first time. And that was kind of what helped drive him to go back. So having something, like you mentioned, mission and purpose focused when you actually transition for good, on the retirement side or when you're getting out, I think is really important as the veteran community and the spouses to understand how to help support through that. So
yeah, and you were asking the difference between somebody that does 4 years versus somebody that retired.
Right.
I would say, as far as the loss of purpose and camaraderie and things along those lines are felt by both. It might be to a lesser extent the less you're in. Almost like if you remember that scene from Shawshank Redemption when they realized they were institutionalized. I'd say the people that are soldiers that have only been in for a few years may not be institutionalized at the same level, where they don't really know how to adapt when they get out.
Right.
And I don't think veterans are victims to this problem. I just think it's something that they need to identify. At 20, though, there's although they have a greater part of them is identified as being a service member, they also have a cushion to fall on with pension and often disability.
True.
Whereas somebody that has 9 years in, they've put in a lot of time, but now when they get out, they've got to find something that can completely provide for their family. They don't have the ability to accept as much risk as somebody that has a paycheck for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Well, QN Instant Teams, one of the reasons why we started this company was to help that dual income on the financial security side for military families, so that when a soldier does transition, whether it's in 4 years or in 20 years, they have more options because they're not the only sole income provider for the family. So that's one of the reasons, we saw the need for Instant Teams as well, to kind of help even those transition periods a little softer. If your husband or wife is also working at the time that you're transitioning, then that pressure kind of comes off as to just taking the first thing available or just jumping at the first opportunity, and getting some time to really get your feet under you and decide what it is you want to do next.
Yeah. And, with that loss of, at some point that service member has to get out. The spouse is oftentimes sacrificing their career in order to support the service member. Whether that's they need to take care of the home and the children while during deployments, or if that's because of PCS moves, the certifications that they've gained or the job that they've been established at, they're getting ripped away every few years. And so organizations like Instant Teams are fantastic at providing those opportunities for spouses, regardless of if they have to move or something along those lines. So I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, let's shift our focus a little bit now. We'll go back into the more tactical. We kind of talked more about the softer side of both of our service and our commitment to our military community. But I'll ask you a few quick questions. So in your service, how did you build confidence when the situation changed and you didn't have the perfect bit of information? So how do you instill that confidence in your teams?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for people anywhere, not just in the military, but especially in the military, to get comfortable executing a mission without 100% certainty. At some point, a decision is, whether it's right or wrong, is better than indecision. Mm-hmm. And so at some point, that leader needs to say, left, we're going left, even though they don't know if left or right is better. But at least the team now has direction to go. So operating off that 80% certainty, I think, is important. It also goes back to those contingency plans. If you're doing, I think the civilian world calls them pre-mortems, right? So if you're thinking through those things that might go wrong, you're able to adjust in that uncertainty. And then also just identifying ahead of time what's no longer acceptable. In the military, we call it abort criteria. If I have to make the decision that that the direction we're going is no longer the right direction, there needs to be certain criteria that's laid out so that regardless of emotion, to pull the plug. Because when you're that invested in a mission and then it goes bad, sometimes people's ego or pride forces them to continue to push even though it's not the right decision. So identifying that criteria ahead of time, hey, if we lose this many people on infill, or if we can't confirm that the target is present, some people are going to be like, well, I did all that mission planning. We've been working on getting ready for this mission for a week. We're executing. Then not only do you fail that mission, but maybe you scared the target away or something like that, So now you've lost the ability to reattack next week. So it's just removing that emotion from those decisions is done by identifying that ahead of time.
Yeah, I think every leader watching this can identify with that, right? Even if we're not on a mission in special forces doing things, we are making decisions as leaders all the time. We're coming up with plans, how we're going to implement technology, how we're going to arrange our teams, how we're going to we just heard a talk on workforce management, how we're going to do that planning. And sometimes the best laid plans, don't work out. And so understanding, I love what you said about identifying when to pull back before you even get started, so that you have a clear set of, okay, if A, B, C, D is not going the way we need it to go, we need to pivot. And not wait too long, because sometimes you can be so caught up in the plans you created that, just like you said, that you're still going forward with the plan, even though the plan is telling you, hey, this isn't the best plan. We need to pivot and we need to change direction or change course here. So that's great advice. Let's talk a little bit about like handing off tasks and in special forces, how did you prevent handoff failure? So when responsibility moved from you to your team members or from your team to another team, how did you think about making sure that handoff was successful?
That's a good question. It's something that oftentimes it isn't done properly, even in the military. I think it's important as much as possible to set up a structure where there's some sort of continuity. So oftentimes in the military, there's two leaders in charge of the same organization. They both shouldn't change over at the same time. That's usually a bad idea. But so that continuity and there should be a long range calendar so that the plans aren't changing just because the leader changed. Another thing that we do, a common terminology is right seat, left seat ride. So, and that refers to if you're in a military vehicle, you got the driver and you got the passenger, which is usually the leader. So that person that's in the right seat is showing the new guy where we're going and what the area looks like and what the mission is. And then at some point after a few days of that, they switch. And so now the outgoing leader is in an observation mode just to provide advice, but the new leader is in the seat. And so then they're at least there to consult for a few more days or weeks or whatever. And I think that's a great model that could be used in any field. And so I took I jotted something else down. Yeah, so I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. I really love that right seat, left seat, and the switch idea, right? So as leaders, how do we train the next people coming up? How do we shift the responsibility and the ownership? And then how do we make sure we're there to support during that transition? And then eventually, move on to the next because we're not needed there any longer. So great takeaway for leaders for sure.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add is what I've seen in the civilian world or the private sector or whatever is it's not as common as it is in the military to train your replacement, to teach somebody on your team to replace you. We could all win the lottery tomorrow. We could all get smacked by a garbage truck tomorrow. And the company needs to be able to pick up where you left off and continue to move. And so that requires a culture in your company to be willing to give up some of that dependence on you. The company, it oftentimes depends on someone for a certain task, and not teaching somebody to replace you gives you job security. But in the military, we're constantly training our replacement. Everyone's replaceable. And we just need to be willing and able to take the initiative and step up when the leader can't anymore.
Yeah, it's great to diversify, right? So it definitely de-risks an organization when other people can step in, or somebody's out sick for a while, or different things, unexpected things happen all the time. So making sure we're cross-trained and cross-functional, super important. Well, we just have a couple minutes, so I'm going to do some quick lightning key takeaways for us to wrap us up here, Phil. But what is one mission principle that you talked about or that you have in mind that every customer experience leader should adopt this year to help increase loyalty with the customers they serve and the employees that they are helping to lead?
So I think loyalty within your team is earned through shared hardship and leading by example. And so any opportunity you have if you're looking to become a stronger leader, any opportunity you have in order to get into the weeds with your team, in order to add value, and it shows that you're willing to pick up some of that burden, I think is important. I think that right there is at the core of military leadership. And if you're not willing to do that, if you're the type of leader that's going to sit back and point at things and tell people to do it, people are going to grumble. And I mean, we've all been there. We've all been the guy that's lower on the totem pole. And it feels better when your boss gets down there and at least demonstrates that they're willing to do whatever they're asking you to do. And that increases loyalty better than any tool I've seen.
Yeah. Loyalty is earned through shared hardship. That is so true. So true. Well, thank you, Phil, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, your service to the country, and your continued service through the Honor Foundation. Honor Foundation is one of my favorite nonprofits. So if anyone out there is looking to support a nonprofit, please look them up. They do a great job at helping our service members transition, and that's a great service to our military spouses who are also supporting these members as they move through their own transition time. I know military spouses take a front row seat in most of that, and usually driving quite a bit of that. So thank you, Phil, for your time today. It's always good to see you, and give everybody at the Honor Foundation my best.
Will do. Thank you very much, Liza. It was a good time.
Thanks.